Oh, going on. So, good morning everyone to the meeting of Growth and Regeneration Scrutiny Panel. Can I just remind attendees that this meeting is being webcast? And before we move on to the formal agenda, I'd just like everyone to do a quick few introductions. I'll get the officers to introduce themselves when the items come up, but if the panel members please introduce themselves, and I'll start from this side, please. Yeah.
Hi, Jonathan Milner, Co-op-D.
Councillor Lee Richards, Kirklees, Newsom Ward, Kirklees.
Harry McCarthy, Conn Valley Ward.
Tyler Hawkins, Dalton Ward.
John Taylor, Burton Ward.
Thank you for the introductions there. So we'll move on to the more formal agenda. Item 1, membership committee. Can I ask for any apologies, please, Philip, for this meeting?
Yes, so Councillor Zarina Amin and Co-op-T Chris Friend.
Thank you. So in terms of declarations of interest, do any members have any interest to declare? Councillor Taylor.
Just for the record, I'm a member of the Housing Improvement Board, and some of the issues we discuss are also being discussed at that board.
Thank you.
Yeah, same board.
Thank you, Susan. And I'd also like to declare I'm on the same board as well, the Housing Improvement Board. So we've got item 3, which is admissions of the public. There are no exclusion of public items, and all the agenda items will be considered in a public session. And then we've got item 4 in terms of deputations and petitions. Philip, have we received any deputations or petitions?
No deputations or petitions, Chair.
Thank you. Can I just bring your attention to minutes of the previous meeting? Please, can we agree it's the correct record? Minutes of the previous meeting, please. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, thank you. And we just move on to item 5, which is public question times. Have we received any questions, Philip?
No questions have been received, Chair.
Thank you. So we'll move swiftly on to item 6, which is damp, mould and condensation. I'll now invite Naz to present the damp, mould and condensation report. Thank you.
I'll introduce, if I may, and then I'll hand over to Hannah Elliott, who's our Head of Building Safety in Homes and Neighbourhoods, to take you through the details. So damp and mould, as you know, is a big issue nationally as well as locally. This report is here today to update Scrutiny Panel on how we're kind of responding to the cases that we have in damp and mould. You'll recall that last winter, government put quite a lot of attention onto this, particularly through the Housing Ombudsman's work. And at that point, we had 800 open cases of damp and mould, which we reported to the Social Housing Regulator, which was as part of a national request of all social housing providers. That resulted in some providers having further a relationship with the regulator. Kirklees was not in that list of people. However, we have continued to see a growing number of damp and mould and condensation cases being reported into the service. Some of that, I would say, Chair, members, is as a result of a kind of a better awareness of the ways of reporting into the service, but also through national campaigns that have highlighted the issue and put a spotlight on it, both through the Ombudsman, the regulator and government and the national media. We've seen some horrific cases, have we not, nationally, and we're not being complacent in Kirklees and ensuring that we're addressing and responding to as many as we can, as quickly as we can. That said, there is a high volume and capacity is constrained both in the contractor market but also within the council. So I'm going to hand over to Hannah, if that's okay, Chair, to just take us through some of the detail of the report and what we are doing with that.
Yeah, that's fine, Naz. Thank you. Hannah?
Good morning. I'm Hannah Elliott. I'm Head of Assets Development and Building Safety in Homes and Neighbourhoods. So, as Naz said, we undertook work at the end of last year to look at the situation with damp and mould in our homes. We are continuing to deliver an action plan that was developed in December last year. A lot of actions have been undertaken. A lot of new systems have been put in place. We have better recording and IT systems and process systems. The numbers of cases are still high and are still increasing, and our concern is that winter is fast approaching, and come October there will be a further seasonal increase in damp and mould cases based on historic trends. So all the work that we have done to date has been around dealing with the existing caseload, putting in systems and processes to help us to manage that better, to help us to take the information from that and turn it into intelligence and use it to help us to understand how we deliver and how we target services in future. The other piece of work that we've been doing in parallel with that is redesigning the whole of our system, all of our processes for delivering damp and mould and responding to damp and mould. So there have been two pieces running in parallel. The current piece that's around the backlog is still ongoing. The team have reviewed and refocused that action plan and are doing so effectively on a weekly basis to ensure that we are responding to the situation and to events that are happening in people's homes. Our current concern is, are we going to be able to clear that backlog? And you will see from the content in the report that the number of jobs that we need to get done on a weekly basis versus the number that we are currently managing to do are quite different. So currently we are looking at that action plan in terms of what's it going to take to get us to a reasonable number by the beginning of October, and we have looked at we are looking at our in-house capacity. We are working with our existing external contractor around what they can do and their capacity, and we are also looking at what other options we might need to take in order to get that work dealt with and responded to. So that's the current process around backlog. In terms of the future planning, the intention is that from October this year, so our current contract with our external contractors expires at the end of September. It has an option to extend for a year, but the work we're doing on phase 2 and the work that we're doing around redesigning the processes is also looking at how might we deliver that service in future, and do we deliver it in-house? Do we deliver it through an external contractor? Do we deliver it through a combination of those two? And that work is ongoing with the intention that come October there will be a new delivery model. The process itself has been reviewed and redesigned, and we are engaging with residents currently around their experiences recently where they have had damp and mould and condensation jobs and reports that have been dealt with, to understand what their concerns are about the process, to help us to redesign and to provide something that responds to what residents need, but which also reacts in the right way and front loads the system. Historically, we've been waiting for a job to be reported, and then we react to that, and then everything comes off the back of that. What we're trying to do is redesign it so that the triage, the diagnosis at the beginning of the process is a lot more detailed, so that it enables us to do the right thing as early as possible. What's been happening is we've been waiting to go and see and deal with a mould treatment job, and then seeing what else might come off the back of that. What we want to do is turn that on its head and ensure that at the first point of contact we are absolutely doing the right thing and responding in the right way.
Thank you, Hannah. Before we move on to comments and questions from the panel, Councillor Graham Turner is here as a Cabinet member. Do you want to... No? Is it Councillor Cathy Scott? Right,
Scott's
just
the portfolio holder. So
no worries, thank you so much.
Not an expert in this field, unfortunately.
No worries, thank you. So we'll move on to comments and questions. Any comments or questions? Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Hannah, for the report. There's a number of observations and comments to make. Some positives certainly to take from this, and I'm very, very pleased about the approach that's been taken, but a number of questions as well. There's a lot of talk about the the additional support we're providing to frontline staff that will help with that triage, so that when the calls come through, that we get the right reaction. Just a suggestion that we might want to share some of that learning material or training material with the MP's offices staff, because quite often they get the first contact. So that it's probably a useful thing to do. I'll leave it to you guys to decide what you share with them, but I think there's possibly something to do there. Pleased to see that calls being made outside of hours. I think that's a really positive, because if people are working, you're going to struggle to get hold of them, aren't you? I just wondered, the 3-year wait for a decant does sound worrying, because if there are significant problems in that property, I just wonder whether we know it says it's specialist needs, but I just wonder if we know what that reason. I'm sure you do, actually. I'll tell you. Maybe just comment on that one as well when you come back. And then just my other thoughts really was, again, we have strong relationships with some of our housing associations, particularly where there's new builds and they take on some of our tenants. Are we sharing our learnings with them, and are we encouraging them to put similar processes in place? And do we have any oversight or observations on that? And then you're absolutely right that since the focus has increased in this area, the external market in terms of contractors is going to be constrained. It's a bit like the fire safety issues, isn't it? And it will invariably lead to increased prices, the inelasticity of supply. You've mentioned looking at our internal teams, which is one of the questions we're going to ask about. But then there was another thought, and this, you may well quite rightly dismiss this, Hannah, but I thought it, so I'll say it. Whether there is any call to action to our own Kirklees local tradesmen that may be able to help, that might help with that capacity. If we did a call to action about, you've seen how dreadful this is, could you help? Now, there'd be all sorts of contractual issues, I'm sure, and we need to make sure that they were the right people and things, but it may be a way of trying to grow that market a little bit as well. I think I'll pause there. Thank you.
Hannah, do you want to come in?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for the suggestion around the learning material. It makes sense, and I will look at making sure we share that more widely with MPs and with other registered providers. In terms of the decant, yes, I do know the specifics. The specifics are not in the report for obvious reasons, GDPR reasons. That one is a very specialist one. My understanding is that since I wrote this report, that person has now been rehoused. 3 years is not a normal wait. It is an exceptional case. But I think, what I would say is, as part of this work, one of the things we are doing is looking at the entirety of that decant list. So decants come from a range of sources, obviously not just because of a damp and mould case, and how all of that is coordinated is being looked at separately by another team, but with members of the team who are involved in this. So in particular, in relation to damp and mould, we are looking to ensure that that decant process is right and that we are getting people out of homes. What I would say is that in terms of the cases that we have seen thus far, where we have surveyed and where we have visited people, there are no current Category 1 cases that we have found, no current Category 1 under the Housing Health and Safety Rating System cases. If there were, I'd be moving people out immediately. Anything where we see a situation that we don't feel people should be living in, we will look to decant them. It's that prioritisation across the piece that the decant board need to do to look at all of those different demands that come, but we get them done as quickly as we can. It's difficult in terms of having enough of the right properties, but there is a constant process there. And then in terms of that external market, yes, absolutely, that's one of the things that we are looking at is where are we with our current in-house capacity, where are we with our existing external contractors, subject to all of those contractual issues that we need to deal with that contractor, what else might we be able to do and how might we be able to look at the local market to deliver?
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Taylor?
Just on your point around relationships with housing associations, which is a really important one because they make up quite a significant part of the provider market in Kirklees, so they have about 6,000 homes dotted around the district. We are a member of West Yorkshire Housing Partnership, where we do a lot of that information share, both what we're doing, what others are doing. So there's a learning both ways, not just us telling our partners what to do and how to do it. We learn from them too. We're jointly with our partners in West Yorkshire accessing training material so that we get the procurement efficiency, but also that we use each other's capacity in an effective and efficient way. So it's a really good point. But some of that partnership also learns from national partners. So it's something that we're definitely alert to. On the in-house capacity, there are challenges with that because it's seasonal work. Potentially, although we haven't seen that over the course of the last year, I have to confess. So we just need to think about the operating model, about how that in-house capacity is deployed and whether there are all the contractual arrangements that we enter into to employ those people. So it's not without its challenges, but it's definitely something we're looking at. And if you look at the data in the report, you'll see that over 100 are being dealt with by our in-house DLO.
Thank you, Naz.
Yeah, just quickly come back on a couple of things. Thanks, Naz, on the housing association stuff. I think just linking back to the sharing of information materials, people who are in housing association properties or private rented may well come through to Kirklees direct. So we need to make sure that knowledge and training and material and that early identification is sat with them. And then just on the decants, I'm assuming that those that we are thinking about decanting, we also have some interim mitigants in place as well, for supporting them whilst we're waiting for that decant. But yeah, that's...
Can I just one more point on decants? The challenge around decants is that we have and we'll come to it in the next report, Chair, that we have a large fire safety remediation programme. So things like Berry Brow and Buxton House in particular require us to move people out. So there's that challenge of finding decants for both priority groups in terms of tenant safety, notwithstanding there are other decants that we do for other reasons, where we might be doing larger scale works where we need temporary decants. So it's quite a challenge. We have set up a panel that now looks at that and prioritises according to vulnerability, health risks and the like. So that triaging is happening now.
Hannah, do you want to come in?
Yeah, so just in terms of that sharing information, so in terms of this report, and this report is on a flight path for Cabinet, one of the recommendations in this report, we have a training package, an e-learning package, which we have purchased as part of our partnership, as part of West Yorkshire Housing Partnership, which is available on My Learning, the council's e-learning platform. What we would like to do is make that mandatory for anybody that speaks to residents or visits residents. So not just people in homes and neighbourhoods, people in Kirklees Direct, people in social care, anybody who goes into a home, be it a private resident or a council tenant, to help them with that identification in order to report things. Kirklees Direct are part of the work we are doing, so they are involved in the work we're doing around how we communicate with residents, what information do they need, how can we help them to ensure that they have the information they need to do that diagnosis piece at the front end.
Just very, very quickly.
Yeah,
just
sure.
Make sure that we pick up Royal Voluntary Service that do the library, what do we call it, home library service, because quite often they're the only people who actually go into those individuals' houses.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Tyler?
Thank you, Chair. Just on the back of that as well, I think councillors do need to be looped into that as well, because often when we're out knocking on doors, we'll be sort of a point of contact for residents as well. Just a couple of questions on the report. First, so 2.1.7 on page 23 mentions a high level of abortive and cancelled visits. I'm just wondering the reasons behind that, if there's some you can share some of the common reasons for that. And the next question I have is on 5.2, which is on page 29. It mentions that the current contracts for mould treatment service expire next month. I just wonder if those have been renewed on the short-term basis or whether a decision's been made on those at this point. Thank you.
So in relation to no access, it's a variety of reasons. We don't always know the reason. We make appointments, people aren't home. Where we do know, we do keep a record and we follow up. What we have is a process in place in order to pursue that, which we didn't have previously. So one of the things we've done is set up a system. So we make 3 telephone calls where we have 3 calls or attempts at the door where we have a case. When we don't get in, we then follow up with a letter in order to, emphasise the seriousness and ask people to call us. Those calls that we are making, and Kirklees Director now helping us with making those calls out of hours, but often other priorities, people forget sometimes, and it varies a lot. You'll see from the report there was one particular day where we had a very high number of, and I forgot to check the weather, but it was probably a nice day and people went out and did something else instead of staying home for us to come and deal with their damp and mould. So, yeah. So, in terms of that current contract, it does expire at the end of September. There is an option to extend it for a year within the contract. We are in discussion with our external contractor at the moment as to how we wish to proceed. And so we are looking at that. What might that model from October look like in terms of in-house, external, or a combination? And we have that option to extend for a year should we wish to with that contractor, but we are in contractual commercial negotiations with them at present.
Thank you, Hannah. Any supplementary, Councillor Tyler?
Just a quick one. Do we know when that discussion will conclude?
By the end of this month.
Any further comments or questions? Councillor Susan?
I just wanted to ask about, on page 25, you mention a partnership with public health, looking at asthma, etc., on the one particular primary care network. Is there any update on that?
I'll be honest, I don't have an update. I am back off leave today, so I haven't caught up on everything. I do know that where that is running, we have had, I think, 3, before I went on leave, we had 3 referrals effectively through that scheme. And we are treating jobs and referrals that come in that way as cases in the same way that we are with jobs where there are follow-ons. So we are, one person holds them, we are grouping them together, and we are ensuring that we do the lessons learned piece, but that we also connect back in with public health and with the primary care network around what we're doing, how we're helping to manage the situation in that home. It is early days with that public health piece, and we know that there's a lot more to do with public health in relation to other pieces of work that we need to do around the quality of people's homes and health and housing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any
Can I ask
supplementary?
one more question.
Yeah, sure.
On the page 27, near the bottom of the page, it identifies 20 homes with high numbers of damp, mould and condensation reports over the last 4 years. What sort of, re-referrals do we have for things like that?
Re-refer, you mean in terms of repeat cases,
Yes.
effectively? So those 20 that are in the high volume will have had more than 5 cases over a 4-year period. Very high could be anything up to 20 repeat cases within that 4-year period. So, and one of the things what has not happened in the past is that the systems we've had in place have not enabled us to do that check that says, is this a repeat job? Has this happened before? Do we need to think about something else? Because we've treated it, it's come back within whatever period. So the new systems that we have and the new process that we're designing to run from October, all of that happens at the front end. So that improved diagnosis and triage that we need to do, and we do it now because we now have these new systems. The first thing we do is we say, has this happened before? If so, how long ago? Did we treat it? How many times? So that as part of that diagnosis, we're saying, do we need to send a surveyor instead of keep sending people out to just treat a problem without having properly understood what's going on in that home?
Right, thank you. I've just
Do you
got
have supplementary?
one comment, please. It's not
Yep.
really for Hannah, I don't think. But on page 28, you mentioned there's a reference to climate change and air quality, and it says that works carried out will have a climate impact with removal of existing construction components and materials and the provision of new. The carbon footprint of activity is not yet understood once new delivery methods are embedded and case numbers have stabilised methods to measure climate impact will be developed. Does that not seem a little bit the wrong way round? Sorry, I think that's for Naz,
that
really.
your-
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Who wants to come in to answer that question?
It's Councillor Lee Richards.
You've said that you don't understand the carbon footprint activity yet, but once you've got your new delivery methods embedded and case numbers have stabilised, then you'll be looking to measure climate impact. It seems the wrong way round.
To an extent, but our first order priority is to ensure that we are responding and dealing with the damp, mould and condensation because of the potential health impacts and risks of allowing that to continue. We have just come out the back end of a review of our assets management strategy. And that will enable us to start thinking about some of our decarbonisation initiatives as part of investment in the stock to address some of that underinvestment that we've had. Some of this is trial and error in the context of ensuring that we have ventilation methods within the home that are addressing our climate change initiatives as well. So we haven't quite got into researching things like passive ventilation and what the benefits of that are for the resident and the tenant. Because as we start using our fabric first approach and making our homes more airtight, ventilation becomes an issue and therefore condensation becomes an issue. And if we're being honest with ourselves, we don't fully understand all the solutions and all the technologies that are available to address those things, and whether the housing revenue account can actually afford to invest in all of those, given the high investment needs that the stock has. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Lee Richards.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Taylor?
Just a quick one. We're doing lots of learning from these responses that we're getting back from residents. And I think I know the answer to this one, but we are presumably creating heat maps of where we're seeing incidents of damp and mould, because that then feeds into the asset strategy, doesn't it, in terms of have we got in particular geographic areas or particular types of construction that are possibly more vulnerable and therefore ought to be in that priority list for any remedial works.
Yes, so the report refers to a new single IT system where all of the information now is held. The other thing it refers to is the dashboard that we take that information to feed. So we have a dashboard within Tableau, within the corporate system. It maps things, it looks at job numbers, it does heat maps, it enables us to see repeat cases, it enables us to look at what's happening in a street, what's happening at an estate, what's happening at a ward level. We are also connecting that dashboard with other things, so public health information around fuel poverty and that kind of thing, and all of the information that we have about works that are going on as well. So there is the dashboard is in its first iteration. It will have more added to it, but it is helping us to understand what is happening where. It's helping us a lot in terms of being able to see those trends in a way that we have not been able to before.
I think Naz wants to come in and then
It was just to add to that in terms of those heat maps, which is a really important point and a really important part of our data intelligence on how we invest. We're also teaming up with our health colleagues to look at so some of that data that you see in the report is a partnership with health to see where the incidence of respiratory illnesses is higher in the district, so that we then home in and look at the data that we have on our own stock and start doing some cross-referencing and overlaying on top of that.
Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, to be fair, I was heading in this direction. I'm assuming we're working with Andy Simcox and his team in data and intelligence about the other data that the council and, as you say, our partners have, so that because the richness of that data will just improve over time, won't it? Thank you.
Any further comments or questions on that item?
You mentioned in the report that there's been issues with pulling data from the contractor. Is there an option in renewal or another contract to address that you make the contractor comply with your data requirements, your systems? Pull that in?
Yes, so there's a lot of work ongoing with the contractor around our access to information. Previously, we have not asked for the access to information in the way that we are doing now, and that's now been provided. But any of that in terms of specifying for a new contract, discussion with an existing contractor around extensions, setting those terms is really key. And what we have found is that having access, particularly for those people who are taking calls, having access into that contractor system is essential in order to be able to tell people, residents, what's going on and provide an update. But certainly also for us in terms of the intelligence and again that feed into our systems and the intelligence that then helps us to understand what's going on, all of that needs to come from that contractor system as well. So yes, and any contract discussion deals with all of those requirements.
Do you have a supplementary, Jonathan?
Just one, reading the report, there seems to be a lot of training up of the trades being electricians. Is there going to be anything on joiners to cut out strips on doors so there's more flow of ventilation around the property? Or is it just mostly on the mechanical ventilation?
Currently, it's mechanical ventilation. Taking out strips on doors is often connected with mechanical ventilation. So if we put in a particular type of ventilation that ventilates into a roof space, you will often cut strips off the bottom of the doors in order to enable that airflow. This kind of is similar to I suppose a little bit similar to the climate change question, which is there are a lot of things we need to think about and they need to connect and we need to think about them in sequence and in order. So as we go out and visit those homes, one of the recommendations might be not mechanical ventilation, there might be some other things, but we then need to think about the consequential impacts of what that piece of work might do. So it's the loops, I suppose, the connections between things that if we cut a strip off the bottom of a door and you live in a flat and that needs to be fire safe, I can't just take the strip off the bottom of your door. so it's trying to bring together all of those different pieces, and that's what, in terms of redesigning the process from October, what I want to move to and what we need to be able to move to is a system where we respond properly at the outset, we pick everything up and we understand, is this a short-term reactive piece of work? Is this something that needs to build into a longer-term programme of work? How does it connect with those other things that are going on? For example, work to install insulation in people's homes. It's making sure all of those loops connect and are closed, I suppose. So I can't just, it's a hard balance in terms of we could do that, but then that might have a different impact.
Jonathan, do you have a supplementary?
No, that's it, thank you.
No. Thank you, Hannah. Any further comments or questions on that item? Soon. Okay. Thank you very much, Naz and Hannah, for the update on the damp, mould and condensation report. Thank you. So we're going to move swiftly on to item 7, which is tenant safety. Is it Naz again?
Item 8. Yes.
Yeah.
Item 8 now.
Is it?
It's 8.
Oh, sorry. Item 8. Sorry about that. Item 8, which is tenant safety, and again, I will invite Naz to present the tenant safety report, please. Thank you.
Thank you again, Chair. Same pattern. I'll introduce and then Hannah will take you through the detail. So this report's here because it's a commitment that was made as a result of the ad hoc scrutiny panel's work, and one of its recommendations was to ensure that Cabinet were updated formally, so therefore this is travelling through its flight path to get to here. This report focuses very much on what is known as the Big Six in terms of building safety. That is fire, asbestos, Legionella, lifts, gas and electric. We think that damp and mould will probably be added to the Big Six and it will be referred to as the Big Seven in the future, but at the moment it's quite separate, and that's why we've given you two different reports. This report, by the sheer fact of the fire safety issues that we have within some of our stock, does focus very much on fire, but does also then talk about performance around how we're getting on with dealing with the other building safety aspects. It's true to say that when the stock transferred into the council, we didn't really have a programmed approach to building safety. We didn't have inspection programs and re-inspection programs. Those are now absolutely in place and working very well, other than some of the no access cases that we may or may not have. But fire remains our biggest risk as a council. That said, we have strong mitigants in place in the high-rise, the six-storey, retirement living schemes and the low-rise blocks, with a mixture of daily, weekly, monthly fire safety checks, CCTV at a 24-hour rate, particularly on the high-rise, a waking watch on the high-rise, and a number of other mitigants. So tenants are safe whilst we are mobilising some of the major programmes around high-rise and six-storey. I'll hand over to Hannah at this point just to take you through some of that detail. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Naz. Hannah?
Thank you. So as Naz said, the report does focus largely on fire. That has been a big area of delivery. We have made good progress on our high-rise buildings in terms of delivering works. There are some works outstanding, mainly where we have no access issues into people's homes, but some of them are contractual issues and delivery issues that we have ongoing. In terms of the low-rise, the six-storey blocks and retirement living schemes, there's more work to do in terms of getting those to site and having those packages of work. Those are all in process now and being developed, and we should start delivery early next year in terms of actual delivery on site. As Naz said, all of those buildings have mitigations in place. The other thing that we do regularly is we review those mitigations and we review the safety and the risk assessment of those buildings. So where we have had more detailed survey information that has become available through the work we are doing, for example, on retirement living schemes and six-storey blocks, we will go back to those buildings and we will review the risk assessments based on what we know. Where we've done more intrusive surveys, we might know more about the construction of the building that we didn't before that might have an impact on risk. So we are always evaluating and reassessing. Tenant involvement is key for us in relation to safety. And we have a fire safety, I always get the team name wrong, we have a fire safety resident engagement team who work with residents around that engagement. They started that work in the high rise, it's been extended out, and they're now working across all of our blocks, six-storey, low-rise, retirement living, working with residents in order to help us to understand their concerns, ensure that they are involved in developing what we do, and we take those messages and we understand what's important for them. That team also work with residents. They do person-centred fire risk assessments, so where we have individuals who might have a particular vulnerability or a particular issue around fire. They do that work with those individuals to ensure that we've properly risk assessed people's individual situations as well as those building situations. They are extending that reach now out into all of our blocks where we need that. They work really closely with the fire service. So the fire service might pick people up that they have visited where there's been a case. They will refer them to us and we will work with them where we have concerns around high risk individuals or high-risk properties. As Naz said, we have survey and inspection programs in place now, which we didn't have previously. The arrangements for those remedial works that come off the back of those inspection programs are largely in place. There are some where they need developing, and we need to improve the way in which we deliver work following risk assessments, but all of that is in process. The other thing that the report mentions is leaseholders, and the fact that we have a particular issue around leaseholders. So we are currently not always able to understand the safety of leaseholder properties where they are in shared buildings or abut our buildings, abut our properties. As of March of this year, leases have been changed. That enables us to get better access to that information from those leaseholders. But currently, we are developing a new piece of work around how do we assure ourselves that leasehold properties are safe and that our properties are safe because they're in our buildings. So that's another important piece of work that's coming out of this that we need to think quite hard about in terms of the safety of our residents and things that aren't necessarily in our control in the same way. And then I think I'd just reinforce the fact that that conversation with the fire service is being strengthened. So we have an ongoing relationship with the fire service, and we are building on that in terms of the way that we work. So not just in terms of person-centred fire risk assessments, but those wider conversations with the fire service about how we manage our buildings, how they are involved in that management, how we ensure that we share information well with them so that if there is an emergency or anything that needs action, that we are sharing that information early enough to enable people to do the right thing.
Thank you, Hannah. Naz, do you want to come in?
Just to add, because there was a focus 18 months ago on high-rise strategy and what we are doing there, it's worth noting for the panel that we have made some significant progress on delivering that high-rise strategy. So at Berry Brow, we have decanted just a little over half the residents there. It's a significant task. We've got 198 tenancies there. And to have done that with risk and vulnerability in mind has been a phenomenal effort by the team. We have just begun consultation with residents at Buxton House about their decant needs, with a view to submitting a planning application for the changes we're proposing to make to Buxton House in the autumn of this year. And on Harold Wilson Court, where we are installing new sprinklers, changing the cladding, and so, sorry, I'm not allowed to call it cladding, external wall insulation. So we will be removing that and replacing it with something that is more consistent with the regulation, the new regulations. Whilst we'll do some of the compartmentation works as well. That started on site at the end of July. So good progress being made. On the 6-storey, 2 of the first blocks out of the 12 that the council owns are now in first stage contract discussions with the successful contractor, and we hope to have that started on site in January 24. So just thought I'd raise those points, Chair.
Thank you. Any comments and questions on that, Tim? Okay, we'll go with Councillor Susan, then Councillor Taylor. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask about Buxton House, because I understand there are a number of leaseholders in that block. Is the fact that you've got leaseholders needing a decant going to slow that process up? Thank you.
So there are, I don't know if we've bought any of them yet, but there are 3 leasehold properties within Buxton House. As part of the work, the team are in discussion with those owners, with those leaseholders around what we will do and purchasing, whether we purchase those properties. But they could slow things up because it's a different situation than decanting tenants. But that has been an ongoing dialogue where possible. There is one leaseholder who is not in the country where we have quite a lot of difficulty in terms of contacting them to take things forward. Naz probably has more, having I've just been off.
Indeed. So the development team who are developing the proposals on Buxton House have identified those 5. There are 5 leaseholders. Two are owned by an individual who is a landlord. One of them does not live in the country and has been nigh on impossible to contact. So as Hannah has rightly said, we propose to acquire those and we're in negotiation with them. They're all willing sellers other than the one that's outside of the country, simply because we haven't been able to contact them. And so the council may need to use its compulsory purchase powers in that scenario, but we would much rather do that by negotiation and a voluntary sale, should that be possible. I don't think there's anything else to add to that, but those properties, including some commercial interests, will enable us to make a much better welcome to that. At the moment, if you know, Buxton House is quite a dingy entrance into the block. It's trying to make it far more attractive and integrate with the blueprint plans that other parts of the Directorate are delivering. So it's the first stage concept designs I've seen do put that on the map in the town centre and add to our town centre regeneration plans, as well as delivering fire safety.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you, Chair. And yes, I do agree. Buxton House has got a dingy entrance at the moment. It will be nice to see it improved. Thank you.
Councillor Tyler.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question. Well, it's specifically about 2.1.3, but 2.1 in general as a section on residents' engagement and involvement. And I know that's something you talked about, the importance of tenant engagement, but particularly on the KPIs, there's no figures relating to how many responses we've received, and we don't know, and because we don't have figures like that, we don't know how many residents are actually communicating with us, and we don't know if there's an issue there in, you know, whether the fire safety resident engagement team and having the champions is the right mechanism for it. We're not able to scrutinise that section, so I was just wondering if it would be possible at some point to get some figures actually as to how much response we've got to achieve the 100% performance we've got there. Also part of in this section as well is there's a lack of reference to existing tenants and residents associations that may already exist through which you can communicate with. Are they involved in any way? Have you had to create or bring together tenants and residents associations in these areas? And the last one I wanted to point, and I appreciate you won't be able to go into the details on this one, but for the Berry Brow flats, on page 35, there's reference about some of the difficulties you've been having with a contractor there. And I'm just interested how they're captured and those difficulties are captured in the system, and so that next time they can be considered, that, you know, when you're looking at contractors in the future, you can say, well, these are the difficulties we had previously. And I'm just interested in how that information is captured. Appreciate, can't go into the details about that specific contractor, but more generally.
Hannah?
So the fire safety resident engagement team, I think I got those words the wrong way around, do work not just with individuals but also with those TRAs, those existing. The other group that they work with and that are involved in this are the tenant, I'm going to get it wrong because I've had a week off. Thank you, advisory. I forgot what the A stood for. Tenant Advisory and Grant Panel, who also have, I understand, those relationships with those TRAs. I'm not aware, and I'm not involved in the day-to-day of that work, but I am not aware that any new TRAs have been created because of this. I think the existing ones that we have, the existing governance system that we have, and the new governance that's coming in terms of the tenant voice panel covers off all of those things that we need, and those relationships are there and are pretty well established. I'll take the point about the KPIs, good point. I will make sure that we supplement that with some better information. In terms of contractors and those issues, so we are always looking at lessons learned where we deliver projects. Those lessons learned in terms of feeding our side of our learning, so our learning in terms of delivery around how we manage contractors, how we manage and develop projects and programmes, sits within the assets team, who are the delivery function within homes and neighbourhoods. We are currently in the process of setting up a PMO, a management office for all of that, and one of the roles that they will play is around that lessons learned. In terms of, and I think I might have got this wrong, but the intimation being also what you know about that contractor might influence how you judge that contractor should they apply for more work. You can't do that. So when people tender, we have to take their tender and their references as it is provided. We cannot. It's a little bit like, I suppose, a little bit like job interviews, in that you can't look at your own personal experience of that person before. You have to do it based on what you tendered, how they responded.
Thank you. Naz, do you want to come in to add on to that?
It was just on that lessons learned, and so there's some service learning, and we hold some of those lessons learned in a kind of a service register and a service system, but also there's corporate learning in all of this, because we don't just contract within homes and neighbourhoods, we contract across the piece. So we work very closely with our procurement colleagues as well to share some of those lessons learned, so that when they're building a contract documentation for others in the council, that lessons learned, it's not necessarily intelligence on a particular contractor, but things that we might do differently in the future. Also across the council, we now have a kind of a contract assurance board, so some of those lessons learned get fed into before we actually go out to tender, so that we're not then tendering something that then legs us up at the back end. So definitely take those points seriously.
Does that answer all your questions, Councillor Tyler? Yeah. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Naz. And Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, just a quick one, really. I'm not sure, I was just trying to find again where I'd read it, but in terms of the escalation processes, if a tenant identifies something they believe to be a fire safety risk, are they going through the normal numbers, or is there a different contact process for that? Do we have a single point of contact for these high rises where they have fire safety concerns, or would they go through the normal contact numbers and the team would recognise it's a high rise and therefore take appropriate action? And partly why I asked that question, again, I think there's some learning from this that ought to be shared with the MP's officers, because if they're picking up first line contact, you know, we'll hopefully have our own internal teams in H&K, K&H, whatever we call it these days, and the contact centre. But it's, you know, if they come through a different route, have we got that same in place? And similarly, and I'm probably looking at Sue here, but because most of the high rises are within your patch, aren't they? But I'm assuming the councillors are involved in the high and low rise that we're looking at, that there's the appropriate escalation and contact points for those councillors as well.
This was before Hannah's time, so I'll take this one if that's okay. On the high rise, we have a system whereby any high risk fire action that is reported by a tenant, we have an emergency response to. So that, yeah, and on any others, they do come in as they would be normally, and then the team in the repairs hub triage that to sort of say, do we need a quick response, or is it okay to go under a routine response? Sorry, you asked me two questions.
It was just more about whether the councillors in those areas that represent these...
Sorry, yes. So strong engagement with Newsom ward members, simply because we have all four in that area, and we're constantly engaging with tenants as a result of some of the works we're doing. We see elected members as being instrumental in being those community leaders and helping us shape that. So every time we're having a kind of a catch-all communication with tenants, whichever block, we'll ensure that ward members are in the know before that, because first port of call usually is your local councillor. So yes, we're very alert to the fact that councillors both receive but also can be very proactive in helping us shape some of the proposals and ensure that there's a smooth running of some of those.
Because I don't know where these 6 block ones are, to be honest.
It will be happening on the 2 6-storey that we're just about to, so Hannah's probably got more.
Yeah, so we've just appointed a project officer for fire who will be leading on the development of those packages for the 6-storey and the retirement living, and so all of all of that work is about to commence in earnest. So as Naz mentioned, we've got the contractor for the first 2 is in place. That is now working through, and that engagement piece should be starting shortly now that individual is in place. That individual working with the consultants, AHR, who are developing all of these schemes for us, all of that programme is now being developed. And part of that programme will be about that early engagement and communication with ward members, with residents, etc. So we're at the earliest stages, but the intention is that all of that will be built with that engagement happening.
Do you have any supplementary, Councillor Taylor? Yeah. Any further comments or questions? Harry?
Thanks, Chair. Just on page 41 and 42 about these leaseholder properties, just to clarify, are these homes and neighbourhoods properties, or is it? I just don't know what the arrangement is there really.
So they are they are properties that are owned leasehold by individuals. So they will be within our blocks of flats, for example. We will own the freehold. They might own the leasehold to that individual property. So they are not our responsibility as homes and neighbourhoods. We do not have the same landlord duties that we would have for properties that we rent out. Our concern is that they are still within our buildings and they are still proximate to properties for which that we do manage, and we need to assure ourselves around the safety of people within that wider block. But the leaseholder is responsible for their property. And unless those leaseholders let those properties, sublet those properties, they don't have any landlord responsibility. So in the same way that if you own your home, you are not legally obliged to do an annual gas safety check. You are not legally obliged to ensure that you have, the right detection and things in your home in the way that you do as a landlord. Those things don't apply to those leaseholders. So they have properties that fall within the demise of our buildings for which we are not responsible, but they are, that could have an impact on the safety of our properties. Did that help in any way, or did that just make it more confusing?
No, that was very helpful. Thank you. So, how many tenants are there now who are living in unsafe conditions as a result of this?
We're not saying that they're living in unsafe conditions. We're saying that in some cases we do not understand the status of a leaseholder property. I can't give you a number in terms of how many people that affects currently, in terms of that breakdown of where we have leaseholders and how many residents there are within those blocks. We're not saying that they're at risk. We're saying that we don't have information about the status of those leasehold properties, and we need to consider whether as a landlord we feel that we need to have that in order to properly understand the risk to our residents.
I'm going to ask Naz to come in, and if you've got a supplementary after that.
It was just really to put it in shorthand that these are people who have bought their home, their council home, under the right to buy. And we have 1,130 approximately leaseholders across the district. And as Hannah says, we'd have to go away and do the analysis about how many tenants is therefore that affects, because we'd have to look at individual blocks where there is a leaseholder and then aggregate that up. It won't really add anything to our work on tenant safety, if I'm being honest, because as I opened up with, we have mitigants in place to keep our tenants safe around fire safety risk. And they're very robust mitigants that we have in place whilst we work through the actual remediation of those blocks. We have attempted for the last 18 months to get gas certificates and electrical certificates of leaseholders, and where they have voluntarily complied, and that's the only legal power we have. We've managed to get about 28% of certificates back, but that still leaves 72, where it's unknown to us, and there is no legal obligation on those leaseholders to do those checks either. So, but the other mitigants wrapped around any block that they live in assure us that we're keeping our tenants safe.
Harry, do you have any supplementary on that? Okay. I've just got a question in terms of the external wall insulation. How many buildings in Kirklees are at risk from that external wall insulation not being addressed?
One, that's Harold Wilson Court, and we're on site now in a contract. The two at Berry Brow, it is deemed that the external wall insulation is not consistent, but given that the council's proposal is to demolish those and start again with a new community on the Berry Brow site, we've got, like I said, we've got the mitigations in place. We have a 24-hour wake and watch there, and we have 24-hour CCTV. Caretaker does a daily fire safety check, so they're quite robust in that context. We hope to have Berry Brow fully emptied out and ready for demolition by the end of 2024, December 2024.
And for Harry Wilson, how's that been progressed in that sense? So you've got a plan for Berry Brow, but what about Harry Wilson building?
Arrow Wilson Court, we are currently, the contractor is on site doing the works, so they'll have to do site setup and establish the scaffolding and all those sorts of things. I don't actually know what the sequencing of works is, but I'm going to hand over to Hannah on.
So yes, Harold Wilson Court started at the end of July. It's in the site setup, so SCAF and site setup and organisation. The sequencing of work will then look at effectively a number of units of flats, so it will do all the work in a number of flats and work its way up the building. EWI is part of that. I will be honest and say I'm not 100% certain whether the EWI is at the start or the end of the process, but the whole of the building will have its external wall insulation removed and replaced.
Thank you so much. Any further comments or questions on that? Councillor Susan Leon Richards.
Just one comment. Harold Wilson Court is not in our ward. That's the only one that isn't. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions from the panel on that particular item? Okay.
I'll just make one.
Oh, Jonathan?
Going back to the private leasehold ones, is there an option for licensing those properties for the ones that are let, like you would do an HMO?
I'm not sure I understand. Sorry.
So in HMO, you've got, I understand you have areas where you have to go through a licensing
Yeah.
process with the local authorities to make sure
No,
that they're,
no.
is that not something
No,
you can do with?
no. So as Naz said, these are people who buy their home through right to buy, and/or who buy a home that was previously bought through right to buy that's then been sold on an open market. We have first refusal on buying those back. They are leases, and they don't have quite the same
Okay. So if
nuance.
they were to subsequently have them as a buy-to-let property to let them,
So strictly speaking, if a leaseholder is subletting, is renting out their property, then they have landlord responsibilities in the same way that we do. So those gas safety checks and the things, those would then apply to that individual who was leasing, who was letting that property, was subletting, was renting out that property. The issue is still, they don't necessarily have to give us the evidence that they've complied with that legislation. Yeah. So they will have duties as a landlord where they let, but where they don't, and it's effectively a private dwelling in the same way that, you know, people own their home, those regulations don't apply, and we can't put those kinds of requirements on people.
Thank you.
Any supplementary?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any further comments or questions on that particular item? No? Thank you, Naz. Thank you, Hannah, for the report on update on tenant safety report. Much appreciated. Does everyone want to take a few minutes break just to refresh themselves, and then we'll come back to item 9. So we're going to move on to item 9. Yeah, we're live. Okay. So, so can the panel please note the work programme attached to the agenda? On the programme, there is a station to stadium pre-decision item. So I did meet with Councillor Taylor, the portfolio holder for Regeneration, who's also in attendance today, for a brief update.
Turner.
No, I said Councillor Turner. Did that sound like... Okay.
Sorry, Chair, just to confirm you did not say that.
Yes, it does. It says Councillor Taylor.
I'm sorry, my pronunciation's really bad, so let's start again. On the programme, there is a station to stadium pre-decision item, so I met with Councillor Turner. I hope that's been recorded correctly now. Yeah. So it's my pronunciation, I do apologise. So the portfolio holder for Regeneration for a brief update. A further update will be provided toward the end of August, and I will update the panel at a subsequent meeting. A reminder to panel members that the next meeting will be held on 25th of September. The items will include Huddersfield Town Centre, Dewsbury Town Centre and small centres and local plan review. There may also be an informal session on corporate risk information. So we're currently exploring the opportunity to undertake site visits to the relevant sites, and we'll keep you updated on that. Is there any comments from the panel on the work programme? Councillor Tyler?
Thank you, Chair. There's only a couple of letters between me and Councillor Taylor, so that's a good one. I mentioned it in the pre-meeting about the skills item, and it's been moved as its own agenda item to the November meeting, or it's proposed to move it to November, should I say. That would give us 5 agenda items at the November meeting. That's quite a meaty meeting, is that? I was just wondering, is there any way we can slot it in somewhere else that might make it less of a November heavy meeting, perhaps? I don't know. That's just something I wanted to float out. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I understand that it's going to be a very jam-packed sort of year for us. We can look to review to see if the item can be placed anywhere else on the work programme. We are mindful that some of the meetings are quite meaty in that sense, and we are conscious of that, but it is fluid and there might be things that might be taken off for various reasons, so we just need to bear that in mind. However, that particular note that you've mentioned, we will take that back and review it and see if there's anywhere else that we can place it on the agenda that might be suitable. Yeah, I think it just depends. We'll have a review of that, Councillor Taylor. Tyler. Do you know what? This is a I don't understand. This is a council. Freudian slip. Oh gosh. And just to mention, obviously some of them are time sensitive, so we're going to have to consult with the officers. Yeah, Councillor Taylor.
I apologise for not noticing this in the pre-meeting, but when you look at the agenda items for today on tenant safety, it says to include information on temporary accommodation, bed and breakfast, which we didn't cover. So I don't know whether possibly we need to just have a relook and see if that's something we want to bring back at a later date. I'm sorry I missed it.
No worries, that's been noted and we can look at that. I think there's been a particular reason why it's probably removed, but we will have a review of that as well. Any further comments or questions on the work programme?
Chair, can I just mention before you...
I've just been informed about the ad hoc regeneration minutes of the meeting that we need to still approve. I believe there's only 2 panel members that attendance to that ad hoc meeting.
So you will record attached
Ad hoc was Liz Smage, Yusra, Andrew Cooper and John Lawson. So you don't have 2 members. No, because it was Chair of Scrutiny was on it.
Oh, yes.
So she was the Conservative.
So we'll note the minutes of the meeting and that I'm mindful that needs to go back to OSMC. Yeah, that's fine. Any further comments and questions on that work programme? Councillor Graham Turner?
Yeah, can I just point out that fortunately I won't be able to attend on the 25th of September because I'll be somewhere far sunnier than this country. So I won't be attending that meeting. So if you want to adjust any of those to when I am available, please look at that, feel free.
We can set up a meeting with yourself, Councillor Graham Turner, in respect to that, or we can have a discussion afterwards in terms of how we work around that.
Yeah, that's fine. I just thought I'd let you know now that I'd say that fortunately for me, I won't be here.
If we are stuck for time, because I'm just conscious we've got quite a jam-packed item in the year ahead, would you be open to providing a statement instead if you're not able to attend in person?
Yeah, I can do a report on any of the items that's on that agenda. That's not a problem.
Okay, thank you. Harry?
Thanks, Chair. Just to query why local plan review is on there twice. I know there's different aspects of the local plan, but if we push for time, we could squeeze one out of a meeting and kind of do them both at another.
That's been noted, yeah. Councillor Taylor?
From memory, I think the reason for those dates is because it's going to full council in November. So you probably couldn't drop the September one.
So what we're going to do, we're going to move the local plan review that we've got in November into the local plan review that we've had discussion in September.
Because it may be that there were just different areas of focus. So what we'll do, we'll consult with, I think it's Joanna, Scrutiny, and see.
David?
So Chair, it's the same thing. It's, from memory, I think you were just trying to find space on your work programme to have two bites of the cherry, but the reality is, if you're constrained for time, you want to go for the September one because by November, as Councillor Taylor says, it will have already gone through the council process.
Councillor Taylor?
I think we probably do need two bites of the cherry at this one, because the September one is on the flight path to full council about the fact that we are going to do a review of the local plan. So some work is ongoing with officers at the moment, isn't it, to see whether we do need, I think we know what the answer is, but there is some work ongoing at the moment to see whether we do need to do a review of the plan. It would then be very appropriate for this panel to look at the remit of that and the time scales and what the consultation might look like in terms of engagement with the public and communications and things. So I don't think we can just cram it into one in September. It might be, it doesn't have to be November, it could be slightly later. But I think you will have to have the two bites of the cherry, I think. And I don't know whether Graham or Graham or David.
I'd agree with that. November is probably not the ideal time. Sometime after then, within your work programme, once we're clear as to what the determination by full council is about the review, then we can be clear as to what the next steps are.
That's right. So what I would suggest, just thinking at the top of my mind, is we could bring that where the post-16 skill is, maybe we could take it there potentially and bring the post-16 skills into the November session. Everyone's agreeable? But we'll obviously have to speak with the officers in respect to that. So if you bring the post-16 skills here, where on 20th of November, we can move that local plan review more further down. Councillor Tyler.
Yeah, I think I see what's been trying to be achieved here in having meetings dedicated to one portfolio rather than blending of the portfolio seems to be the case, although that does fall apart a bit towards the back end. But I think that's what's been tried to achieve here. But I think with the time we've got, I don't think that's really going to be possible. I think that there does need to be some blending. So it's something to take away and have a chat with officers on. But I think I don't think we'll be able to have meetings just dedicated to one portfolio, given how much we've got to cover, really. Maybe. maybe, yeah, that might be something another meeting.
I was
maybe,
considering additional meetings, and that's something that has come up in discussions with officers, with myself, but I just didn't want to make that decision on my own. I need agreement from panel members that ad hoc meetings might come up.
I think what we also need to bear in mind is we need to have some space in case there are any pre-decision scrutiny things that come forward that aren't in sight at the moment. So let's not jam every single meeting or we're going to get a right mess. So I personally think we may well need to have an extra meeting. And it does look like that, you know, that there are months where we don't have meetings, so there possibly is an opportunity.
We have noted that and discussed that, so yeah, that is something that's on our radar. Any further comments or questions? Harry?
Sorry to drag this out again, Chair, but I think we discussed at the last meeting, the workshop planning meeting, about having potentially some of the panel meetings outside of Huddersfield, and the next one includes Dewsbury and Batley. I mean, it would be a good opportunity potentially to merge having it over there with the opportunity to visit one of the sites, if that would be possible.
When you...
Explored, isn't it? We are exploring it.
We have explored that, so just for clarity, you're wanting to hold the meetings in those particular areas?
Well, it was just to ask the question, really, as to whether that would be possible.
Yeah, so we've already discussed that, and that is something that is happening already. We're in discussion with of holding those particular agenda items in the areas that they are. So Dewsbury, for example, the Dewsbury Town Centre plan to be held in Dewsbury Town Hall, and obviously the Batley and Small Centres Town programme maybe to help be held in Batley. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Any further comments or questions from even officers or panel members? David?
Just say, I think logistically it's going to be difficult to hold the same meeting in two places on that day. So I think the plan is for Dewsbury, so we hold it there. We will try our best to accommodate a site visit, but I just have to state that we are struggling with capacity looking forward in terms of how we not only do justice to the reports that you need in order to scrutinise the items effectively, and obviously you've seen the quality of the reports today and the quality of the reports that you've had previously. I don't want that to be reduced. I want you to have the most appropriate opportunity to scrutinise in every case, and that also you meet with the correct officers, the correct directors, as you've had today. That's why we've tried to sort of get the balance right in terms of the work programme and tried to bundle them into certain places. But I do accept that it's got to work from your perspective. All I'm flagging is that it may be difficult to do everything that you want to do, given that you've got a very heavy agenda ahead. So if something has to give, I would suggest your site visits have to give, but we will still hold the meetings where you want them to be held.
Councillor Taylor?
I fully understand what David's saying. I don't think it needs the officers to do that site visit. I'm sure we could persuade Councillor Firth. I'm sure he'd jump at the opportunity to show off Dewsbury. We might have difficulty stopping him, and that might be a way to solve this, to be honest.
That's been noted, and we'll take that back in terms of Councillor Firth maybe showing us round. Yeah, any further comments or questions on the work programme there? No. Are we sure? Okay, so if there's no further comments or questions to make, we'll close the meeting there. And thank you everyone, the cabinet members, as well as officers, and for the panel members for attending. Thank you.